You know, it starts with a really big challenge, right?
Yeah.
Be of one mind. I don't know what it was like in the first century, but I got to say, in the 21st century, being of one mind on anything these days seems to be really challenging.
And,
Right?
and especially today, right? I mean, we
Oh
have
my
an
gosh.
election that is less than 30 days away, and
Right.
it is heated, to say the least,
Really?
right?
I haven't heard. It's, yeah, so, and then we've got this health crisis and conflicting understandings about, protocols and what's best and what's overstated and understated, all of that.
Yeah, we have protests,
Yeah.
we have violence, all in response to the racism that is throughout our culture.
Yeah. We're dealing with certainly a struggling economy with 8% of our nation unemployed and struggling. Small businesses are struggling and so forth. And so there's a level, I guess, of frustration
Yeah.
and anger that's coming through all of that it's hard to imagine being of one mind.
Yeah,
And yet
absolutely.
Peter calls us to be a people of one mind. And it's so easy with all of this anger and all of this frustration to get sucked into it, right? I feel it within myself. I was sharing with Rick that I was in a conversation with a good friend fairly recently, and he and I disagreed on one of these issues. And as we were talking about it, I could feel, the anger welling up in me, and my words were starting to get sharp, and I was on the verge of saying things that I should not be saying. I shouldn't even be thinking these things. We're brothers in Christ, and but that's how it is. So it's not that I'm above this, or that because we're Christ followers we're above this, but we're being called to rise above this.
Yeah, and while we think that it's worse in the 21st century, really division among people is as old as human beings.
Yes.
I mean, it's part of our DNA. It seems, right? We're just wired to divide. I mean, and so while the 21st century may seem worse, and at times it may be worse, brokenness and division have always been part of our human reality. And this is now, we live in a real angry world, right? Our world tells us if someone harms us, then you harm them back, right?
Yeah.
If someone says something about you, then you say something back. But Peter is challenging us to live differently. He goes on to say, it's not on the screen, but it goes on to say, don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. Instead, pay them back with a blessing. So when we choose to live differently, just like Christians throughout history have been living in divided cultures, our unity will impact and change the world around us. Peter tells us this is our calling and that God promises a blessing. This is what God has called you to do, he says. And what is the blessing? I would say the blessing in all of this is that a world, a culture, even lives can be changed because of the way the church community chooses to live.
We live in a culture that says, if you insult me, I'm going to smack you. You smack me, I'm going to punch you. You punch me, I'm going to stab you. You stab me, I'm going to shoot you. You shoot me, I'm going to blow up your house. There's no end to this downward spiral of anger and vitriol that is going on until we take seriously the teachings of Peter and really came from Jesus.
Yeah.
These are the teachings of Jesus, who calls us to be unified in the ways that we treat each other. We have a world that is so disunified, and we are called as Christ followers to be unified. And Peter gave us some really easy, or it's not easy, simple things that we can do. We can sympathize with each other. We can be wishing the best for each other, viewing each other through the perspective of brother-sister love. And we can be tender-hearted toward each other and not get into the downward spiral of responding evil for evil. That's what unity is. That's what grace under fire really looks like.